Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Curot Writer, and this week we're going to be discussing the 1981 movie titled Stripes. Now, Stripes was an American military comedy that runs for an hour and 46 minutes long. It is directed by Ivan Reitman. It is produced by Ivan Reitman and Daniel Goldberg. The script was done by Daniel Goldberg, Len Bloom, and Harold Ramis. The score was done by Elmer Bernstein, the cinematography by Bill Butler, and the editing was done by Harry Keller, Michael Luciano, and Eva Ruggiero. And the stars of this movie are Bill Murray, Harold Ramis, Warren Oates, PJ Soles, Sean Young, John Candy, John Laroquette, Judge Reinhold, Conrad Dunn, a couple of SCTV alums like Joe Flaherty and Dave Thomas. To me, I feel that Stripes reminds me a lot like the classic Army comedy movies. One in particular, of course, is Private Benjamin, with Bill Murray kind of taking the place of Goldie Hawn with only a few distinctive differences. Hawn really didn't know very much about the Army or the many regiments and training you have to go through to make it in the Army, while Bill Murray as Private John Winger seems to know a lot about the Army protocols, and in many ways he could outsmart and outwit his superiors. To me, his sardonic humor is played quite effectively, and might be one of the reasons why this movie is really that good. Not great, but really good. Back in 1981, Illinois native Bill Murray was pretty much in his third year of acting, gracing the silver screen with his witty charm, his cynical humor, and his manipulative tactics to outsmart practically anyone crossing his path. It seems like all of his movies, like in the 80s and into the 90s, he kind of sort of played out that kind of role. Then by around the 2000s, with the turn of the millennium, he kind of played kind of like cranky, lonely guys now. I mean, it seems like he's kind of lowered his sarcasm to play more serious roles with the way we see him today. But back in the 80s, it was all about his sardonic humor, his witty charm, and his ways of trying to outsmart anyone. I mean, if you try to outwit this guy, you're not going to be really that successful. After donning his craft on sketch comedies like Saturday Night Live and the Canadian equivalent SCTV, Murray has turned up a string full of off-the-wall comedies like Meatballs, Caddyshack, and then we have this one, Stripes. Being the third one, shows that his flair for slapstick comedy is just a natural thing for him. So why spoil a good thing, right? The opening scenes features Winger, who after a few hours has been down on his luck. He loses his job as a cab driver, his girlfriend dumps him, and a basketball ricochets through his window. Oh yeah, he also loses his supper too, because like on his way home to his dingy apartment, his pizza fell on the sidewalk. Feeling that there's nowhere to turn to, he decides to enlist in the Army. He also tries to persuade his brilliant friend, Russell Ziski, played by Harold Ramis, who also seems to be things don't seem to be not going well for him. He is an English teacher trying to teach foreign students, how to speak English, and it seems like the only language they could speak are swear words. So the duo collaborates and writes their own set of army protocols, much to the chagrin of their hard-nosed drill sergeant Hulka, played by the late Warren Oates, who during that period of time hasn't acted in a while due to poor health. Of course, sadly, a year after this movie was made, maybe even less than a year after this movie was made, Warren Oates sadly passed away from a heart attack at the age of 53 years old. Murray seems to be permanently liberal in his points of view towards the people surrounding him, both superior and inferior to him. He's not afraid to speak his mind out about you, even if it's not very flattering. When Hulka gets shot, Winger arbitrarily steps up to the plate and commands the other recruits, and these are where the funny bits of the movie comes into effect. Unfortunately, just like Private Benjamin, Stripes gets lost out of focus near the middle of the film. In Private Benjamin, the film lost its charm once the feminist message comes across while they were in Europe. In Stripes, the film gets bogged down once, Sergeant Hulka and his troop are assigned to go on a mission to Europe. If they would have just stuck to the slapstick elements it was intended for, the movie would have been a whole lot much more better. Winger's initiative was to operate the very first mechanized armored vehicle, which was like take the shape of an RV, but it's got all kinds of technological doodads, and John and Russell, Winger and Russell decide to, go on a bit of a joyride along with the two MPs, female MPs, played by PJ Solds and Sean Young. Even though, they were, I think they started off in Italy, and then they kind of like drove through Germany, went past the Iron Curtain, and wound it up in Czechoslovakia. Yes, back in '81, Czechoslovakia still existed. It wasn't until 1992 when the Czechs and the Slovaks decided to form their own independent country. So they go on this mechanized armored vehicle before it goes underway. Winger and Ziske hijack the RV, and it goes behind the Iron Curtain, and they become lustful towards two female MPs. If the focus was on these four characters, it would have worked out in the long run. Instead, it concentrates on the ridiculous scenes, including like mud wrestling and the RV hijacking. I didn't care too much for the mud wrestling scenes. I didn't really care too much for this military comedy to turn into some kind of a military initiative stuff. We could see that in military dramas. We don't need to see this in here. If they would have just stuck to the basics, this movie could have been a whole lot better. But I guess we just have to take it for what it is. The final product becomes deplorably infantile, and it takes away the intrigue that both Murray and Ramis carry throughout the film as likable but somewhat obnoxious characters. I liked it when Private Winger verbally lashes down at the recruits and belittles their background upbringing, like when Hulka was asking why they're in the army, what their intentions were in the army, and Bill Murray is just in the background belittling them. I mean, Bill Murray's sarcasm has always been somewhat priceless. Many people may have thought his sarcasm was, obnoxious, somewhat misogynistic, and what have you. But I don't agree. I thought his wit and his charm have always held a special place in my heart. And, hey, I hope to one of these days see the old Bill Murray back I mean, movies like Lost in Translation and St. Vincent, sure, they may have elevated him up to playing more serious parts, but I want to see the old Bill Murray. I want to see the old sarcastic Bill Murray instead of the somewhat gruff characters he seems to play these days. You know, it just seems like, you know, the older he gets, he just wants to play these serious roles. But it's his comedy that really truly makes a difference. Yes, I know maybe he wants to break away from typecast, but it was so much more fun to watch. I mean, these movies that he did in the 80s, even Ghostbusters, Scrooged, and Groundhog Day, that's typical classic Bill Murray, not gruff and grumpy Bill Murray. Bring back that spontaneous wit that he embodied, and bring it back. We want to see the old Bill Murray back. Yes, I know he's 63 years old, and maybe sardonic humor just doesn't seem to be of his interest, but it has always captured the intrigue from me. We want you back, Bill Murray. And yes, your newer roles has given you a little more award recognition, but think of the people who have grown up in the 80s, who has enjoyed your movies, and we want to see that come back. So please, Bill Murray, please do it for your fans. If you're listening to my YouTube post, which I hardly think you will. I mean, what do I know? But anyhow, one of the most standout performances was in a supporting role was the John Candy. Of course, you know, he was a longtime alum from SCTV fame, and he comes actually on his own as Private Dewey Oxberger. And I think in this role he was more than just the typical friendly, heavy-set guy. He's an ally of Winger's, and his comedic wit is equally effective, and it rivals quite nicely with Bill Murray. I don't think I really need to say that much about John Candy. John Candy, you know, he really outshines a lot of his performances, whether he's playing a lead role or a supporting role. And, you know, it was, he really turned in a pretty good performance. There were some other notable performances too in this movie. I also enjoyed John Laroquette's performance as Captain Stillman. He kind of reminds me a little bit of his famous Night Court character, Dan Fielding, kind of a bit of a sleazy kind of guy. I guess he actually does kind of play off the role as the protagonist, low-ranking officer character, Captain Stillman, who seems to come across as kind of a bit of a douchebag. But, you know, hey, John Laroquette played off his role quite nicely. And in a way, it did remind me a bit of Dan Fielding on Night Court, which to me has always been one of my favorite TV sitcom supporting characters. If I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, sorry, I gave it away, yes, I will give it a 7. I think it truly deserved that. I know Ivan Reitman over the past few years has often collaborated with John Candy. And well, yeah, John Candy, yeah, but he's also aligned himself with Bill Murray and Harold Ramis, and they would of course meet again in 1984 with the movie Ghostbusters. I enjoyed Ghostbusters. I didn't really like the second one too much, but the first Ghostbusters, hey, that is a classic. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you'd like to write back some feedback, sure, please feel free to do so. If you want to subscribe to my channel, go ahead, but if you write to me, remember, be kind, be courteous, don't be rude, and I will be back again with another review. So until next time, this is Eric Correct Writer saying keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.